There are cases you close, and there are cases that close you. The rain hadn't stopped for 3 days in Pine Hollow, a quiet American town with more trees than people. Officer Daniel Reeves had seen every kind of coal. Bar fights, missing dogs, drunk drivers, but nothing like the one that came in on a Friday night in November. A girl's voice on the line. Soft, shaking. He's outside my window, but he's smiling. By the time Daniel reached the house, the snow was fresh, and so were the footprints. But they led nowhere. He thought it was just another false alarm. He was wrong. Because that night didn't end. Not really. It stayed with him. In every quiet shift, every flicker of light, every dream where the snow fell just a little too quietly. The storm rolled in just before midnight. The kind of slow, heavy snow that made the whole town sound like it was holding its breath. Pine Hollow was small enough that Daniel Reeves could drive from one end to the other in under 10 minutes, yet large enough for secrets to hide in the dark between porch lights. He'd been on patrol for nearly 12 hours, coffee gone cold in the cup holder, the same old country song crackling through the radio when the call came in. A 911 patch, female voice, teenaged, breathing hard. "He's outside my window," she said. "He's smiling." Then static. Daniel's pulse quickened, the kind of reflex only small-town cops understand. Half the calls were false alarms. The other half were the ones that stayed with you forever. He grabbed the radio. "Dispatch, this is Unit 3. Location of that call: Willow Creek Road. House number 214. Copy that. I'm en route." He flicked on the lights. The streets glowed red and blue against the falling snow. And as he turned down Willow Creek, every mailbox, every tree, every darkened window looked the same. The house was a small, 2-story place at the end of the road, half hidden behind bare oaks. The porch light was on. The front door opened. Daniel stepped out, boots crunching through the snow. "Pine Hollow Police." "Hello." "No." Answer. Hushed a wind, moving through the pines like something breathing. Inside, the living room was empty. A cup of cocoa sat steaming on the table beside a phone off the hook. Upstairs, a window was open, curtains fluttering against the night, and on the ground below that window, footprints, bare footprints, small, leading away from the house, then stopping abruptly in the middle of the yard. Daniel crouched, shining his flashlight over the snow. The trail didn't fade. It hustanded as if the girl had stepped into thin air. It kayed, it hin. But the line crackled. Onlir. Static. When he looked back up at the window, the curtains stopped moving. For the first time in 10 years on the force, Daniel felt something he hadn't in a long time, a quiet, cold fear that didn't belong to the storm. Snow kept falling as Daniel circled the house, the beam of his flashlight cutting through white silence. The air smelled of cedar and smoke. Someone nearby had a fire going, but the warmth didn't reach here. This house felt different. It wasn't just empty. It was watching. He crouched again, running his hand near the last footprint. The snow around it was undisturbed. No drag marks, no continuation. Just a single print fading into nothing. He stood, scanning the tree line. Emily, echoed out, remembering the name Dispatch had mumbled through static. Emily Harris, Pine Hollow, PD. "Can you hear me?" No response. A dog barked in the distance, then stopped abruptly. The sound bounced off the frozen stillness, leaving Daniel's heartbeat loud in his ears. He moved toward the tree line, his boots crunching over ice. The flashlight caught something ahead, a small patch of red near the trunk of an oak. He exhaled, fog blooming in the air. Kneeling closer, he saw it wasn't blood. It was fabric, a piece of flannel torn from a shirt. The fibers were fresh. He called Dispatch. "Again, this is Unit 3. I've got possible evidence, but I'm losing comms. Send backup to Willow Creek." The radio cut out mid-sentence. Just static again. That's when he heard it faint, but clear. A voice. Not from the woods. From behind him. He was smiling. Daniel froze. The hair at the back of his neck lifted. The voice sounded like the one from the call, trembling, close, young. He turned, flashlight trembling slightly. Nothing there, just the empty yard, the open window, the still air. He stepped backward, toward his patrol car. The snow crunched beneath his boots. Then another crunch echoed back. Not his! His beam darted toward the sound. For a split second, he saw movement between the trees. The faint outline of someone standing there. Still. Watching. Police! Stop right there. He sprinted forward. But when he reached the trees, the figure was gone. No footprints. No tracks. Just untouched snow, smooth as if no one had ever been there. Daniel stood, chest rising and falling, the cold biting at his lungs. He was alone again. And yet, when he turned to look back at the house, the front door, which he swore he'd left open, was now slowly closing. The door shut with a dull, final click that echoed through the empty yard. Daniel froze. The house stood still again, wrapped in snowfall and silence, the kind that makes every sound feel like an intrusion. He took a breath, hand hovering over his holster, more out of instinct than fear. He'd been a cop long enough to know most noises had simple explanations. Wind, settling wood, maybe a broken latch, but the longer he stared at that door, the less he believed in simple things. He stepped onto the porch again, the wooden boards creaking beneath his boots. Inside, the living room was colder now. The cup of cocoa had stopped steaming. The phone lay silent beside it, a pool of melted snow spreading around its base. Daniel's radio crackled faintly. Unit 3, this is dispatch. Copy. He snatched it up. Copy? This is Reeves? I'm at the Willow Creek residence. Possible missing juvenile. House appears empty, but something's off here. Backup en route. Ita. 10 minutes. He exhaled in relief, until he heard it. A single footstep upstairs. Daniel's flashlight darted toward the staircase. Pine Hollow PD, he called. If someone's up there, make yourself known. Nothing. He climbed slowly, each step groaning under his weight. The upper hallway smelled faintly of cinnamon, the kind of lingering warmth left by families long gone. At the end of the hall, the door to the girls' room was half open. He nudged it with his boot. Posters lined the walls. A snow globe sat shattered on the floor. And near the window, the one she said he was standing outside, was something written in the frost of the glass. 3 words. He found me. Daniel's chest tightened. The handwriting was shaky but fresh, like someone had just dragged a finger through the frost moments before. He turned sharply as headlights flashed through the window. Back up. Finally, relief washed through him as he rushed downstairs, pulling the door open. But the driveway was empty. His cruiser sat alone, lights off, engine silent. No tire tracks except his own. The radio hissed softly. Through the static, a voice whispered. Faint, familiar, and unbearably close. Officer Reeves, he's smiling. Then silence. Daniel stood in the doorway, snow swirling around him like ghosts. Somewhere in the woods, a faint whistle rose and fell. Human, melodic, and impossibly calm. That was the night the town of Pine Hollow changed, and Daniel Reeves stopped believing that every case could be solved. Morning came gray and brittle, the kind of light that didn't feel like daylight, just the color of exhaustion. Snow still blanketed Willow Creek Road, smooth and untouched, as if the night had reset itself. Daniel sat in his cruiser across from the house, watching the windows. He hadn't gone home. Couldn't. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the frost words on the glass. He found me. The official report would call it a missing juvenile case. No signs of abduction. No evidence of forced entry. Just absence. But Daniel knew what he'd seen. The footprints that stopped. The voice that didn't sound human through the static. Chief Lawson showed up just after sunrise, coffee in one hand, concern in the other. "Reeves," he said, voice gruff, "you look like hell." Daniel didn't look away from the house. "There was a girl here. Emily Harris. She called 911. When I arrived, she was gone." Footprints led out into the yard, then just stopped. Lawson frowned. "Snow will play tricks on your eyes." I checked dispatch. The call came from an unlisted number. "No Harris family at this address. Place has been empty 3 years." Daniel finally turned to him. "That's not possible." Lawson took a slow sip of coffee. "Look, I know you've had a long night. Take the day. Go home. We'll file it as a misdial." Daniel watched as the chief walked back to his car. When he was gone, Daniel stepped out into the cold again. His breath curled into mist as he approached the porch. The house seemed smaller in the morning light, less menacing, almost fragile. But when he reached the window, the frost writing was still there, clear as before. "He found me." A shiver ran through him, not from the cold, but from something heavier. He pressed his hand against the glass. It was warm. He pulled back fast, scanning the house again. Inside, the furniture was covered in white sheets, dust thick in the corners. But near the mantel was something that hadn't been there before, a picture frame, face down on the floor. Daniel pushed open the door, boots crunching on broken glass. He picked up the frame and turned it over. A family photo, a man, a woman, and a girl. Smiling, the same face from the missing person bulletin pinned to the department board 10 years ago. Emily Harris, reported missing. Never found, and behind her, just barely visible in the corner of the photo, a shadow, a figure standing outside the window, smiling. Morning came gray and brittle, the kind of light that didn't feel like daylight, just the color of exhaustion. Snow still blanketed Willow Creek Road, smooth and untouched, as if the night had reset itself. Daniel sat in his cruiser across from the house, watching the windows. He hadn't gone home, couldn't. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the frost words on the glass. "He found me." The official report would call it a missing juvenile case. No signs of abduction. No evidence of forced entry. Just absence. But Daniel knew what he'd seen. The footprints that stopped. The voice that didn't sound human through the static. Chief Lawson showed up just after sunrise. Coffee in one hand, concern in the other. "Reeves," he said, voice gruff, "you look like hell." Daniel didn't look away from the house. "There was a girl here. Emily Harris. She called 911. When I arrived, she was gone." Footprints led out into the yard, then just stopped. Lawson frowned. "Snow will play tricks on your eyes." I checked dispatch. The call came from an unlisted number. "No Harris family at this address. Place has been empty 3 years." Daniel finally turned to him. "That's not possible." Lawson took a slow sip of coffee. "Look, I know you've had a long night. Take the day. Go home. We'll file it as a misdial." Daniel watched as the chief walked back to his car. When he was gone, Daniel stepped out into the cold again. His breath curled into mist as he approached the porch. The house seemed smaller in the morning light, less menacing, almost fragile. But when he reached the window, the frost writing was still there, clear as before. "He found me." A shiver ran through him, not from the cold, but from something heavier. He pressed his hand against the glass. It was warm. He pulled back fast, scanning the house again. Inside, the furniture was covered in white sheets, dust thick in the corners. But near the mantel was something that hadn't been there before, a picture frame, face down on the floor. Daniel pushed open the door, boots crunching on broken glass. He picked up the frame and turned it over. A family photo, a man, a woman, and a girl. Smiling, the same face from the missing person bulletin pinned to the department board 10 years ago. Emily Harris, reported missing. Never found, and behind her, Just barely visible in the corner of the photo, a shadow, a figure standing outside the window, smiling. The wind carried stories in towns like this. They clung to old porches, slipped through broken windows, whispered across frozen creeks. Daniel had heard his share, but none ever felt like more than folklore meant to scare children into coming home before dark. Until now, he sat in the diner across from the station, the photo on the table beside a half-drunk cup of coffee. The waitress, Ruthie, slid him another refill. "You're looking at that picture like it owes you money," she said softly. Daniel gave a faint, tired smile. "You ever heard of the Harris family?" Ruthie's hand froze mid. The sound of the coffee pot sitting down was the only thing that broke the silence. "You don't talk about them," she said finally. "Why not?" "Because every few years," she whispered, leaning closer, "someone new sees that house, someone who shouldn't. And then they start seeing him." Daniel frowned. "Him?" Ruthie's eyes shifted toward the fogged window. "The man in the snow." He waited. She nodded slowly. "Started long before the Harrises moved there, back when Willow Creek was still a mining town. They said a man went missing during a blizzard in '47. They never found him, just his coat frozen to a fence post and footprints that circled the same patch of ground again and again, like he was trying to dig his way into the earth." Daniel listened, not as a cop, but as someone trying to piece together a pattern only ghosts seemed to follow. "After that," she continued, "people started seeing him. A tall man in a black coat shows up when someone's about to disappear. Sometimes just stands in the yard, staring at the house. Sometimes leaves messages in the frost." Daniel's hand tightened around the coffee cup. "He found me," he murmured. Ruthie's expression went pale. "You saw it too, eh?" Nodded. She backed away a little, voice trembling. "Then you should leave town, detective, because once the man in the snow notices you, he doesn't stop." Outside, the daylight dimmed as clouds rolled over the sun, and through the diner's fogged window, Daniel could have sworn he saw a shape standing still across the street, tall, unmoving, where the snow didn't seem to fall. But when he blinked, it was gone, and all that remained was the sound of wind dragging something across the empty road. Something heavy, like boots through snow. By morning, the storm had swallowed half the town. Snow piled against doors and windows, sealing everyone inside like a white coffin. But Daniel was already out there, boots cutting through drifts, breath sharp in the cold. The photo in his pocket had become an obsession. The figure behind the Harris family haunted him, not because of what it showed, but because it seemed to follow him. Every time he looked, the silhouette fell closer. He reached the end of Willow Creek Road, where the house stood half sunk into the ground. Its roof bowed under the weight of snow. The front door creaked open before he even touched it, as though the place had been expecting him. Inside, everything was quiet. Too quiet. The air smelled of dust and cedar, and something faintly metallic, like rust or blood. Daniel moved carefully, flashlight sweeping across old furniture covered in white sheets. The beam caught something on the floor footprints, bare ones, leading deeper into the hall. He crouched down, tay very wet. "Frere!" Every instinct screamed to leave, but his training wouldn't let him. He followed the prints into the living room, where the fireplace sat cold and unused. A single chair faced it, and resting on that chair was a photo album. He opened it. Page after page showed the Harris family. Smiling birthdays, Sunday picnics, the kids growing older. But then the photos changed. Faces blurred, bodies distorted, and by the last page, the family was gone entirely. Every picture showed only one figure, tall, faceless, standing in snow. Daniel's throat tightened. He turned another page. This time, it wasn't a photograph. It was a piece of newspaper, an article from 1948. Local miner vanishes in blizzard. Last seen near Willow Creek Road, Desami Road, the same house. Then, somewhere above him, a floorboard creaked. Daniel froze. He looked up, flashlight trembling slightly. "Police," he called. "Who's there?" Silence. Then another step. Slow. Deliberate. Right above him, he pulled his weapon. Eyes locked on the staircase. The steps continued, one after another, until they stopped just at the top landing. The house went dead quiet again, the kind of quiet that hums in your bones. Then, from the dark at the top of the stairs, a voice whispered, low, almost broken, "Why did you come back?" The flashlight flickered once, and for the first time in 10 years on the force, Daniel felt something he'd never admit out loud. A kind of fear that didn't come from danger. It came from recognition, because that voice sounded like his own. Daniel didn't move. He couldn't. The words still hung in the air, trembling like a ghost, too scared to disappear. "Why did you come back?" His flashlight flickered again, casting shards of light up the stairs. There was nothing. No shape, no movement. Who's the slow, steady drip of melted snow from the roof above? He forced himself to climb, one creaking step at a time. Each footfall sounded louder than the last, echoing through the empty house like a countdown. The temperature dropped the higher he went, his breath fogging in the beam of his flashlight. At the top, the hallway stretched long and narrow, lined with closed doors. Wallpaper peeled away in strips, revealing wood darkened with age. The third door on the right was open just an inch enough to let a thin line of cold air breathe out. Daniel pushed it open. The attic stairs waited behind it. Steep. Black. He hesitated only once, then started climbing. Halfway up, something brushed against his shoulder. A strand of string? A cobweb? He didn't check. He kept climbing until his head rose above the attic floor. The beam of his light swept across the space dust, broken furniture, a cracked window letting in the wind, nothing else. Then he saw it. In the corner, a small table. On it, a radio, the kind you'd find in the 40s. Its dial glowed faintly, though it wasn't plugged in. Static hissed through the silence. Daniel stepped closer. "Who's up here?" No response, just a low, constant hum. Then a voice emerged through the static, not live, not modern. Male. Rough around the edges. "This is Officer Daniel Reeves. Reporting from Willow Creek Road. Found a Harris place empty. Snow's coming in hard. If anyone hears this, I think I found him." The man in the woods. Daniel froze. The recording continued, the voice cracking as if under stress. "He's not what we thought. The voice cut off. The radio hissed louder, then fell silent. Daniel stood there, heart hammering in his chest. That voice wasn't old. It wasn't someone else's. It was his. He grabbed the radio, yanking at its cord. But there was no power, no battery, nothing that could have made it work. Then a sound came from behind him. Slow, dragging steps across the attic floor. He turned fast, gun raised. A figure stood near the window, tall, thin, back turned, its outline barely visible against the snowlight. "Police," Daniel barked, "turn around." The figure didn't move. He took one step forward, then another. The floor groaned under his weight. When he was just a few feet away, the figure finally turned, and Daniel's entire body went cold. The face, looking back at him, was his own. Daniel stumbled backward, the beam of his flashlight swinging wildly across the attic walls. For a second, he thought his mind had cracked under the pressure, that sleep deprivation, guilt, or maybe something darker was finally catching up. But the thing, the man standing in front of him, didn't vanish. It just stared. Its expression was almost human. Almost. Every detail was right. The scar on Daniel's cheek from a high school fight. The same badge number glinting under the dim attic light. But the eyes were wrong. They looked like someone remembering how to pretend to be alive. Daniel raised his gun. His voice trembled. "Who are you?" The figure didn't answer. It tilted its head, curious, like a reflection studying its own cracks. "Why are you here?" Daniel's voice broke through the silence, rough and small at the same time. What do you want from me? The figure's lips moved, but the words weren't spoken. They crawled through the air, whispered in Daniel's own voice. You came back. The flashlight flickered again, and for a heartbeat, the attic was filled with movement. Shadows twisting on the walls. Faces that weren't there. The static of the radio rose again. 1,000 half-voices bleeding together. Daniel backed away until his foot hit something, a floorboard that shifted loose. He glanced down, heart pounding. Beneath it, something metallic caught the light. He crouched, pried it up, and found a badge. He's Bads. Same number. Same scratches, but it was rusted, burned at the edges, like it had been buried for years. He froze. This couldn't be real. But the voice, his voice, came again, this time from behind him. You never left. Daniel turned. The figure was gone. Only the open window remained, the wind howling through it, snow spiraling into the room. He looked down at the badge one last time, and then the floor beneath him gave way. He fell through darkness, crashing into the hallway below, dust and wood splinters raining around him. His flashlight rolled across the floor and stopped, its beam landing on something at the end of the hall. A photograph. Daniel dragged himself toward it. His ribs ached with every breath. He picked it up, wiping the dust away, and his stomach turned. It was him, standing with Sheriff Monroe. Only the date in the corner read 1989. He hadn't even been born yet, and on the back, written in trembling ink, were the words. He never stopped watching over the town. Daniel's breathing quickened. The radio upstairs began to hiss again, louder this time, the sound of his own voice breaking through the static once more. If anyone finds this, I think I'm still here. The photo slipped from his hands as the attic light went out, leaving the house in total, suffocating dark. The next morning, Daniel woke up slumped over his desk at the sheriff's station. The storm had passed. The world outside looked calm again, washed clean, as if the night before had been nothing more than a fevered dream. But the ache in his ribs told him it hadn't been. And the old badge, the one he'd pulled from the floor, sat in front of him, glinting faintly in the weak morning light. He reached for the phone, dialing Monroe's number. The line rang once, twice, then a voice answered. Not Monroe's. Sheriff's office. Deputy Miles speaking. Daniel blinked. Miles? Where's Sheriff Monroe? A pause. Sir? Sheriff Monroe's been retired 15 years. Daniel froze. That's not possible. I was just with him last night. We were at the old Walker property. Another silence. Then, sir, the Walker property burned down in 1998. It's just an empty lot now. The air in Daniel's lungs turned cold. He stared at the badge again. The rust, the faint burn marks. The photo from the house lay beside it. 1989. He whispered, Miles, what year is it? Miles hesitated. Sir, it's 2023. Daniel's hand trembled. He glanced around the station at the same desks, the same faded wanted posters on the wall, except something was off. The names were different. The faces were unfamiliar. A few framed photos of the department hung near the door, and in the center of one, Daniel saw himself. The picture was yellowed with age. The plaque beneath it read, Deputy Daniel Reed, missing in action, 1990. Oitu he stumbled backward, the world tilting. Miles rushed out from the adjoining office, confusion on his face. Sir, you look like you've seen a ghost. Daniel opened his mouth to answer, but the words wouldn't come. He looked at his reflection in the window, his face pale, eyes hollow. And behind him, faint and impossible, stood Sheriff Monroe, watching quietly. Monroe's voice was soft. Told you, some cases don't end, kid. Daniel turned, but Monroe was gone. Only the hum of the radio filled the silence. He sank into his chair, staring at the badge once more. He should have felt fear. Instead, there was something else. Peace, maybe, or acceptance. He finally understood what the town had been trying to tell him all along. He never left, because he was never supposed to. The radio crackled softly, its voice thin and distant. A whisper from somewhere between the living and the forgotten. Daniel sat there, eyes fixed on the badge. For the first time, he noticed the engraving on its back, faint words, almost lost to rust. Protect the ones who remain. He didn't remember ever carving those words, yet somehow they felt like his. The air in the station had changed. Everything was quieter than it should have been. No cars outside, no ringing phones, no chatter from the bullpen. Just the hum of the fluorescent lights, steady, unblinking. Then the radio crackled again. Unit 7, respond. Unit 7, do you copy? Daniel's heart skipped. That was his old call sign. He hadn't heard it since that night. He pressed the button, his voice barely above a whisper. This is Unit 7. Go ahead, static. Then a reply, soft, trembling, familiar. There's been another call. Same address, the Walker property. He froze. The same property, the one that burned down decades ago, the one he'd just seen last night, or thought he had. His hand shook as he picked up his coat, slipping the old badge into his pocket. He looked around the station once more, half expecting someone to stop him. No one did. It was as if the building was holding its breath. Outside, the air was cold, but the streets were empty, too empty for morning. No people, no movement, just the faint echo of wind down the main road. The cruiser was still parked out front, same one he'd driven for years. The one they said was decommissioned after the accident. The keys were in the ignition. He didn't question it. Just drove. Snow began to fall again as the old road wound toward the outskirts of town. The sign that once read Walker Road was half buried in frost, tilted like a memory trying to disappear. When he pulled up to the property, the lot was nothing but blackened ground and a few stubborn timbers jutting from the earth. But the porch light, the one that shouldn't exist, flickered faintly in the distance. He stepped out of the car, the wind biting at his face. And then he heard it. The phone ringing. That same shrill, endless sound echoing through the dark, though there was no phone in sight to follow d'Italiana, each step slower than the last. When he reached the center of the lot, he saw a shape rising from the shadows. A small wooden box, half buried in the snow. He knelt, brushed away the frost, and froze. It was an old radio receiver. He's old one. The tag still attached. Property of Deputy Daniel Reed. The static roared once more, and a voice trembling, broken, came through. Please, someone help him. He's still in there. A woman's voice. The same one from that night, the one who had called again and again. Daniel whispered, Ma'am, who are you? But the voice only repeated, Please, help him. Then, faintly, a second voice, a man's voice. His own. I'm here. The radio light blinked once. Then, when dark, Daniel stayed there, kneeling in the snow, his reflection faint in the frozen metal. The pieces were falling into place. The storm, the burned house, the unanswered calls. He hadn't survived that night. He'd been answering his own case ever since. The snow had stopped. The world seemed to hold its breath as Daniel stood over the silent radio, its last words still echoing in his mind. He's still in there. For the first time, the weight of 10 long years, maybe more, lifted off his shoulders. He remembered now. The storm. The flames. The trapped woman. The call that came too late. He hadn't made it out that night. The house had taken him to... He looked around the blackened lot. The skeletal remains of the Walker property. The charred ground glinting faintly under the thin moonlight. Everything felt both distant and familiar, like a memory half-lived and half-lost. A voice came softly behind him. You kept watching, even after the rest of us forgot. Daniel turned. Sheriff Monroe stood there, older than he remembered, yet unchanged in the way that mattered. His eyes were gentle, filled with that same quiet authority. Daniel didn't speak. He didn't have to. Monroe walked closer, the snow crunching under his boots that somehow didn't leave prints. Every town needs someone to stay behind, someone to keep the lights on when the dark comes calling. Daniel's throat tightened. Was that ever me? Monroe smiled faintly. It always was. The wind whispered through the burnt beams, carrying voices soft, overlapping, like 1,000 lost coals fading into static. Daniel could almost see them now, shapes in the haze, familiar outlines of faces he'd once sworn to protect. They weren't haunting him. They were thanking him. The porch light flickered one last time, bright enough to wash the whole lot in pale gold. Monroe placed a hand on Daniel's shoulder. It's time. Daniel looked down at the badge in his hand. The rust had vanished. It gleamed again, clean, alive. He pinned it back to his chest. He looked toward the town. His town. The quiet streets, beyond the trees. The same roads he'd driven 1,000 times. The same houses that had slept under his watch. Someone's got to keep an eye on him, he said softly. Monroe nodded once, then stepped back into the shadows. And Daniel Reed, deputy, watchman. Ghost turned and walked toward the distant glow of Ashwood, Issey Mine Street. The storm clouds broke apart. The dawn came slow, soft, golden, and for the first time in years, Ashwood felt safe again. Some cases never close. Some protectors never leave. If this story stayed with you, subscribe for the next investigation, because in every quiet town, there's another mystery waiting to be found.